everybody, and welcome to another episode of Eating at a Meeting. I am in Orlando this week, so I am coming to you from a really cool house at the Evermore Resort. So very fun opportunity to be here. So, but I'm very excited to bring to you today this conversation called Allergy Safety at Events. I don't think so isn't an acceptable answer. And to talk to us about this is Christina LiPuma, who is a registered dietitian and a certified diabetes educator who's passionate about chronic disease prevention and treatment, as well as food allergies, because she herself has an allergy to peanuts. And Christina, I met you based on a LinkedIn post that you did about a month ago, right? About you having FOMO about going to a conference because of an experience that you had last year with your peanut allergy. So welcome to the show.
Yeah, Tracy, great to be here. And I listened to your podcast fairly regularly since I discovered it a couple months back.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. That's exciting. Well, and one of your former colleagues was on the show, I think it was last year, right? Yeah. Talking about alcohol and labeling of alcohol. But so I want to go back to that story that you posted on LinkedIn. You had an allergic reaction at an event. Can you take us back to that story and share what happened?
Yeah, absolutely. And so the reason I posted on LinkedIn about it was that it was the 1-year anniversary of when it happened. I was seeing lots of my dietitian friends posting going to FNCE, which is sort of the big conference for registered dietitians. It's the food and nutrition conference and expo. So it's sort of, the place to be if you want to get continuing education and network. And I was feeling a little triggered because of what had happened the previous year at FNCE to me. And the long story short is that I had an allergic reaction to peanuts and but I can walk you through a little bit more of the details if that's good.
Yeah, definitely.
At the time I was working for Center for Science in the Public Interest, and they had sent me there to present a poster on policy updates for front of package labeling. I was really excited to do the poster session, and they were paying me to be there to do that. And they had put money from the budget to send me this conference that I was excited to go to. And I was presenting on like the second or the third day. So I'm in educational sessions in the morning, and then I have about 10 minutes. The first day I was there, I saw that there was a kiosk right outside of the expo center that was selling Mexican bowls. And I said, great, I can grab a Mexican bowl really quick, run inside and start presenting. And a Mexican bowl is a pretty safe food when you have a peanut allergy for the most part. So I felt pretty good about it. But the second day that I was there, the day of the poster presentation, the Mexican bowl had changed to a curry bowl. So I didn't realize it was a rotating kiosk, having never been to this convention center before in Minneapolis. And I said, okay, it says curry bowl. Let me go up there and see what type of curry bowl, because a Thai curry bowl does have peanuts. I have an allergy. And the first guy is like, I don't know. I don't think so. But he said, let me ask this other guy, right? The other man working there. So he goes up to his coworker, and his coworker says, no, I'm pretty sure it doesn't have peanuts. And I said, great. And again, I really wanted to eat this because it was either eat this bowl or don't eat lunch. And I get pretty cranky when I don't get to eat lunch. Not my best self, probably wouldn't give the best presentation. And okay, I got, not the firmest answer. Goes up to his coworker, and his coworker says, but I said to myself, something doesn't feel right, but maybe I'm anxious, right? Mm-hmm. There's a little bit of a psychological component here. And I'm feeling nervous about public speaking, about presenting this poster. So I take a second bite. And after the second bite, I'm like, oh, I really don't feel good. I'm not 100% sure this is an allergy, but I throw the bowl away. And I hate wasting food, but I want to be safe. So I throw the bowl away and still feeling tingly, starting to get a little sniffly. They flew me all the way out to Minneapolis to present the poster. I'm networking with people, and I'm getting more and more uncomfortable. And about 30 minutes in, I call it quits. And I say, I need to get out of here. I need to go home. I need to take care of this. So I went back to the hotel and continued to have an allergic reaction and take care of myself. But I felt guilty about leaving, and I felt angry about the fact that, the people who were working there couldn't even tell me what was in the bowl. And even a little more angry that they hadn't just written Thai curry bowl, in which case I wouldn't have eaten it. And it really put a damper on the conference for me. I missed out on educational sessions. I missed out on networking. And not to mention, I had to go through a pretty serious allergic reaction, which I guess was the worst part of it.
But I think when you put the fact that you missed out on the education that your company is paid for, right? You missed out on the interactions just with networking, everything. Those are just as important as having that allergic reaction. And thankfully, you're here with us to tell us that story, right? But at the same time, those are still high level reasons for you to be there and that you find value in, right? That you missed out on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the most frustrating things about it is that it really could have been easily avoided. So I met with, someone who was high up in catering the next day. I went to straight to the info desk on the last day of that conference. And I said, I need to speak to someone in catering. I waited. And again, I was losing time out of my precious day, but it did feel important. So I waited, and eventually someone came out from wherever catering is housed. And she said, what can I help you with? And I told her, this is what happened to me. And these were the kinds of answers I got. And this woman from the catering company said, the employees could have radioed downstairs and in seconds gotten a clear answer. And they didn't do that. And they weren't properly trained, but at the same time, they also could have labeled this.
Right.
And, she offered me a free meal. And I said, that's the last thing that I want right now from your catering company. I'm not eating anything here ever again.
Yeah. I mean, so now they just lost somebody going to that convention. Maybe you're somebody that books the business there as well. You're never going to book there, right? You're never going to come back. Yeah.
Yeah. And I did start to think about this on a higher level. Again, as someone who's in the allergy advocacy world.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think that this could even go a higher level up. So I'm just one person, but the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, who puts on this conference, they're full of dietitians who know about food allergies. They could make the choice and say, wow, this catering company or this convention center, we've had, if they hear they've had problems or, in the future, they could not book with that catering company or, any convention center that doesn't put on labels or have a good allergy policy in place.
Mm-hmm.
So it did really get me thinking about ways that, we could put pressure on companies to do better for allergy labeling and protect people who are going to their conferences and events to try to accomplish their professional goal.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, you're a registered dietitian, you're diabetes educator, right? But, because you used to work for the public for CSPI, make sure I say it right. How do those roles in what you did in that advocacy role and then your role as a person with food allergies, how do you see those meshing together? Because food allergies are not required by law. California just passed the law that says, that food facilities have to label for the top 9, but only 10 states have currently passed laws that saying pass the food code that should labeling, but the rest of the country does not. How do you mesh that, your advocacy, your work in advocacy, nutrition advocacy, as well as your food allergy together?
Yeah. So before I started working at CSPI, despite being a dietitian, I had never really worked with a lot of patients who have food allergies.
Mm-hmm.
I had a handful when I used to practice an outpatient, but that wasn't my focus.
Mm-hmm.
And then working at CSPI, they just happened to have advocacy arm that focuses on allergies. And I was really excited to work on it, but it opened my eyes that really what I knew about food allergies was just my experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are people who have different allergies and different sensitivity levels. And learning about that made me feel almost more responsible for advocating when I, kind of got the perspective of other people. And
Mm-hmm.
I got the chance to work with big allergy advocacy organizations like AAFA and FAIR.
Mm-hmm.
And also working at CSPI and working in the allergy advocacy world
Mm-hmm.
sort of made me feel like I shouldn't settle for the status quo. Like when I was growing up, I just accepted that labeling was how it was and I had to deal with it. But, they just passed Addie's Law in
Right. California.
California.
Mm-hmm.
And having worked in the policy space, I'm starting to see how when, groups of people, different advocacy groups, different individuals,
Yep.
when people come together, they can really make change that really improves the lives of people who have allergies.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'll note that I remember in, I guess, 2004 when FALCPA passed,
Uh-huh.
right? Like I
Yeah.
was in the 4th grade and I don't remember hearing about this law passing,
Right.
but I remember pre that time, I was learning to read, a few years prior.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember my parents teaching me how to look for the words that would indicate that I couldn't eat a food. And you had to read the whole label really carefully. It was never separated out. It was never bolded.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden it was always bolded. It was really clear at the bottom. And that was because of labeling advocacy that people like CSPI and those other allergy groups did. So,
Right.
Having that experience as someone who has an allergy and has been impacted by it, but then seeing how it gets done really has given me a lot of hope that it can be even better in the future for people who have food allergies.
I love that. Yeah. Now let's go back to the labeling real quick. What do you do as a person with a peanut allergy that when the statement says may contains, nuts or produced in a facility that also does this? Do you avoid those foods or do you, I don't want to say take a risk, but take a risk to eat them?
Yeah. So I will say the decision to eat or not eat that is very personalized, but there is a push right now on both the international level and in the US to start standardizing those statements.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, in Canada, they recommend just using may contain, not may contain traces or manufactured on equipment. There's a push. Consumers want more standardized language. They want to know what those statements mean. And right now, legally, they don't have a definition, although, manufacturers in good faith, I mean, they don't want to give allergic reactions to their consumers. That's not good for business. So they're doing their best, but it often ends up being a little over precautious. And there's research that a lot of people who have food allergies can eat very small amounts, and these may contain traces they may be avoiding for no reason. For example, I know that I am probably not the most sensitive person to peanuts, right? Like I've never had an airborne reaction. I don't think I've ever responded to a may contain traces label. So I do eat those things. But the hope is that in the future, through advocacy, places like CSPI and AAFA and FAIR and all the other great allergy advocacy organizations can come together and push for a labeling system that's more standardized and based in a real risk assessment, right? So manufacturers would have to have gone through a science-based risk assessment, and it would be based ideally like on a threshold. And people would then be able to make decisions based on their information that they get from their allergist, right? So now they have great testing. People can go in and do an oral food challenge and find out, like, am I responding to 1/1000th of a peanut, or can I maybe eat a quarter of a peanut? And then people can make decisions in conjunction with their care team. So I'm really pleased to see on the international level, this is something that people are working on. But at the end of the day, it is very personalized. So I personally tend to just ignore those labels, but I know some people can't and they don't have that luxury.
Well, and food allergies are very personal in general, right? Because I mean, you're allergic to peanuts and I'm not. So but but it is also not your identity. You're a person who is a registered dietitian and diabetic who happens to have a peanut allergy, and you have to eat this way. But you also can't just like you can change your career and go be a masseuse, right? But you can't change that peanut allergy, right? So and I love the fact that, the advocating for it and bringing attention to it is really important to you based on what you've, grown up and seen. And I do love the fact that, there are laws that are changing, and people are seeing that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I do agree that being a person with a peanut allergy, that is part of my identity. I can't ever remember not being a person with a peanut allergy. So, we're going on decades here of me handling this. And I think it has made me more aware and also a better advocate for others. And I think I bring that to, and mesh that with my skills as a dietitian because, having had that experience makes me want to help others who are having similar experiences.
Right. Yeah. And just having you mentioned that you growing up with it, right? You can, and things changed while you were growing up. It's different when you're in school, right? And you've kind of got your mom and your dad or your caregivers, the people you live with, advocating for you. But I'm glad that your parents also taught you at a young age to start reading those labels so that you could advocate for yourself. But when you go to an industry conference, you are that person, right? And it's whether an event planner, that organization asked, I'm curious, did they ask in the registration form? Do you remember if you had a food allergy? They did not
Sure,
ask?
they didn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you ate up the concessions, right? And there was no catered food. You all ate, everything was concession?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I like this idea that you brought up, like the difference between school and being a professional. I had it down pat when I was a kid. And I do think my parents really pushed me to speak up, to call the restaurant ahead of time if I was going out to eat with my friends, to, have a plan with the school nurse every year and know where the medicine was. But when you start going in the professional environment, there are a lot more variables. So you mentioned sort of, did they have a form to report your allergies? This conference that I had this issue at didn't, but I recently went to another conference that was to keep up my credential as a diabetes educator. And they did have do you have any dietary restrictions? And I wrote peanuts in big letters, allergic to peanuts. But then when I went to that conference, they didn't do anything about it. I had to spend large amounts of time at the conference chasing down the catering staff saying, because, it was a buffet style. They had lunch, they had dinner, and then I think the second day they had breakfast. So each time there was a meal, I had to chase them down. I had to say, okay, does any of this have peanuts? They had to go to the back. They had to ask. And I spent a lot of time standing next to the catering. And I am very, very upset because I didn't get a cookie at snack time because there was no one to ask. And I was very hungry and did not get my cookie.
100%. And I've been in that same situation. I recently snapped a photo of myself waiting at the buffet for somebody to check on whether, the eggs contain dairy and the pork or the sausage contained, gluten, right? And I snapped a picture. Everybody else is sitting down, right, and eating their meal. And I'm still standing there 5-10 minutes later waiting for somebody to come back and to answer me. So I'm missing out on that interaction at the table, right? I'm missing out on, maybe I don't, like you said, with your thing, you didn't have a lot of time between sessions and your own presentation to grab that snack or grab a safe meal, a full meal in general, right? Yeah. So what in your conversation with the woman at the convention center, and your experience as a dietitian, what would you like to see done, or how would you like to see it proceed in the industry?
Yeah. So thinking specifically for conferences, I think it's going to depend on size. I think the gold standard would be just label everything, right? I mean, at minimum, big 9 food allergies, because, those are the ones that most people have. But if you could even better label all of the ingredients on the buffet line, or at least have a way, a QR code to look them up, that would be really great. I know that takes more time and can be more expensive. Having planned a convening myself, I asked the catering, can we get all of the ingredients on it? And they said, that will be an extra $1,000.
Oh, wow.
Which I thought was kind of crazy. But, I see that requires a little extra effort and is not always feasible. At minimum, labeling the big 9 really clearly, and then having someone available, right? Like when they're serving that meal, someone should be near the buffet line because people might have questions.
Right.
And then the other thing that they could do, if it's a smaller conference, asking ahead of time and saying, hey, do you have any food allergies? And then, the catering is set before the conference for sure, right? Like the caterer should be able to tell the event organizer, okay, this dish at this meal is going to have peanuts, and I could say to the event organizer, hey, I have a peanut allergy when they send me that form. And they could reply back, none of the food is going to have peanuts, or there is one dish that's planned to have peanuts. It'll be this day. It'll be this dish.
Right.
So I can be prepared.
Yeah.
And similarly, with people who have different food allergies, again, that would probably only work for a smaller conference, but it doesn't seem totally infeasible. It's not like they're deciding what to make the day of,
Very true. Very true. Yeah. Yeah. And some, the menus and if it's some events, you have a standard menu that you're ordering from. And unfortunately, typically those aren't labeled already. So when a meeting planner is trying to choose them, it makes it very hard. But again, you're trying to plan those menus. You're right. It's not like you're at home and deciding, okay, what am I going to eat for dinner tonight? Right. If you're planning a conference for as many people as that are at the Dietetic Association conference, you got to think through that way in advance. What advice would you give to people who are planning events, being a person with food allergies? What kind of information? I mean, you kind of just outlined some of that, but because sometimes, and I was having this conversation this morning, actually, you don't want to be the burden. You don't want to be a burden because you're saying, hey, I have a food allergy, but how can planners, balance it out of helping you not be a burden, feel like a burden? And in my opinion, you're not, but also providing that communication and, to make you feel comfortable and included in that event. And at the same time, helping them do their job, not taking on your stress, which they should be taking on your stress in some respect, not the stress, but the concern, right?
Theoretically, all conference organizers want their attendees to be safe.
Right.
Right. They don't want anyone leaving their conference with a horrible allergic reaction or, someone who is supposed to be presenting something not be able to present. So I think it makes the most sense. And, the best course of action is to really be proactive. Again, if you can, having a interest form and saying, do you have any allergies? Trying to work with people ahead of time, possibly sending out the menu ahead of time could be helpful because then I could ask questions.
Right.
I think as much that can happen before the conference is going to be helpful because again, the day of conference, I don't want to worry about this. I have to because I'm a person with a peanut allergy, but I would prefer to be networking and making connections and learning and presenting and focusing my energy there. So if anything can happen beforehand, that makes my experience far more seamless.
Yeah. Do you prefer it to say contains nuts or nut-free or both?
I don't think it matters, but what I do think matters is that it's clear which one is happening, right? Like, it needs to be consistent. So I wouldn't want to see one thing say contains dairy and one thing say nut-free. And then I'm like, okay, well, if it's not labeled, what does that mean?
Right.
So I think the most important thing is for it to be consistent. And that could be another thing ahead of time. If the conference organizer says, we're doing our best to accommodate allergies. If it has one of the big 9, it will say contains. Or if it does not have your allergy, it will say does not contain. I think contains, now that I'm thinking about it, contains might be my preference. And then the assumption is the ones that don't say anything,
Yeah.
don't contain it. But again, I do think consistency is the most important, and communication of which system are we using.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And I'm like all these different scenarios that I've personally experienced on the lack of consistency, right? Like, and I was talking to a server the other day. I'm like, what does the N mean on there? Well, the N means that, and I think he said it's nut free, but then on another sign that was underneath a banana nut muffin, there was still an N on there. And I said, so, and he said, if it says, like, if it contains nuts, then I'm going to say it contains nuts. And I'm like, but that sign goes opposite of what you just said. So I think and basically with the two servers that you worked with too, the training of it, right? Like they're the ones that are, the chefs in the back, right? And they're the ones talking to you as the attendee. So making sure that they understand the system as well.
Yeah. And I was thinking about that too, as we were having this conversation about what does each thing mean? The people who are on site, whether they're serving or they're just bringing in the chafing dishes, they should be prepared to answer these questions, or they should be able to very quickly get the answer to the questions. But when you get sort of that wishy-washy, oh, I think it's this.
Right.
I mean, getting an answer like that could mean the difference between me having a reaction or not having a reaction. And now that I've been burned by that, it more likely means that I'm going to either eat or I'm going to not eat. And not eating at a conference, I'm not going to die from not eating, but it's really unpleasant. I don't know if you've been through this scenario where you're like, I don't feel comfortable eating. I'll just not eat anything. And you get, to 3 p.m. and
you're hangry.
All you want to do is run out of there because you're not like thinking through problems and, being your best work self. All you can think about is food and how you need a snack and how you're angry you didn't get a snack.
Right.
Which is what happened to me with that cookie when I was at that conference, and I won't let it go because I was trying to network and I was cranky, and it showed, and I feel bad for the people that I was, short with, but I was in a bad mood, and then I got some food and I did much better.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that brings up that, the conversation of inclusion and, and I was talking about, I don't know if you've noticed if you've been to a DoubleTree hotel recently, but I think it's been 2 years ago or maybe even 3 years. DoubleTree partnered with a company called Partake Cookies, which is a top 14 free cookie company so now DoubleTree has signs on their registration desk. Hey, if you are vegan or you have a food allergy, you can still partake in our cookie by having a Partake cookie, because they give out those chocolate chip cookies. So that is a solution. Like even just go buy the prepackaged Partake cookies, right? And or what other kind of cookie that you choose to do, but you felt excluded in that experience with the cookies and the desserts.
Yeah. And I absolutely love it when I see an option for, one of those great products that is certified free of everything. Not every, but the major allergens that we're seeing most often. And that's what we did. So as I mentioned, I've organized a conference before, and it was specifically about allergy advocacy. And we were talking about that precautionary allergen issue. And of course, people who care about this issue are more likely to work in this space.
Right.
Or people who have this problem are more likely to work in this space. So we were like, we are going to be sure that we have at least like 3 or 4 snacks on our snack table that's just out all day that are certified free from. And we also were very strict. We were not going to accept any snacks that had a precautionary allergen labeling, right? Like we didn't want there to be a cookie that said may contain, and then people to be like, okay, what does this mean for me? Does it mean anything? But event organizers can do so much for people who have allergies just by saying, okay, we'll buy a big box of this brand that's certified free from the top 9 or top 14 sounds even better. I don't even know if I could list the top 14.
I can do that.
Then I feel included, right? I feel included and I feel happy and I feel safe. They actually do that when I've gone to the Red Cross to like donate blood. They always have at least one thing that's like, this is free from the top 9 and I feel so safe eating those cookies after my donation because I need a little fuel. I've just donated blood. It's nice to not have to say, I need to skip because I don't know what's in this cookie.
Or I have to bring my own and I don't know that until I get there, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Half of the fun of donating blood is the snacks. So, I feel included when.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So.
Yes, and helping other people, but I like the snacks.
Exactly. And when you go give blood, you're getting a snack. So, make sure that there are options there. Besides, making sure that you have an option, what does inclusion look like going to a convention center, going to an event like that? Because a lot of people will say, hey, well, no, our venue is not nut free, right? Or is not peanut free. I can't have, when I say there's no nuts going to be served on my event venue, I'm like, so to me, I'm going to ask this question. I'm like, I have said that. I'm like, okay, so we're going to be nut free in my event space, but I am telling Christina, hey, our event's nut free, but the venue is not. How do you feel about that? What does that make you feel more comfortable? Does that make you feel apprehensive still, or?
So for me, that would make me feel far more comfortable. But again, as I mentioned to you, I've never had the food challenge test done by my allergist, but I suspect that I'm not amongst the most sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, when I hear this event space is peanut free, I'm really happy. And it's the same way with restaurants. If I go to a restaurant and they say, we don't have anything on the menu that has peanuts, and it's true, I'm going to go back to that restaurant, right? Because I feel really safe there. And I've heard from a lot of staff at restaurants, they say, oh, the owner's kid has a peanut allergy, so we don't serve any peanuts. Or, we were getting too many people who had peanut allergies. It's just easier this way. It's really affirming for me that it's going to be a safe experience when I hear those kinds of things.
Right.
And those are the restaurants when people say, where do you want to go out to eat? I'm like, let's go to this one because I know I won't have to be stressed about it. So, even if it's not the whole event, the whole conference center is peanut free, if I'm hearing from the staff that they've made a real effort, they're not intentionally serving anything with peanuts, that makes me a whole lot safer. There's still room for error there. I'm still going to have to pay attention, right? If I open up a meal in a place that's peanut free and I see something that looks like nuts in it, I'm surely going to ask and double check, are these walnuts, peanuts? What are they?
Right.
But it makes it a lot less stressful for me if someone's making an effort to make the space that I'm existing in peanut free.
Yeah, because society is not peanut free, right? And that. But when we make those efforts to provide that kind of experience, it elevates your experience and it's not impacting me, right, for 3 days or on an airline flight, which some people get mad about that. But, it's an hour, or 4 hours or whatever it is. You can live without peanuts, right? But yeah, I like to say when you plan for the minority, you can feed the majority, right? So if I'm eliminating peanuts, for Christina or, 5 other people at my conference, then nobody's going to notice it for 4 days. Right.
Yeah. Nobody's going to be mad that you didn't serve peanuts, but somebody who has an allergy will feel uncomfortable. And you're always, I can't imagine throwing an event where you don't at least have a couple of food allergies. I think the rates are like around 1 in 10 adults or something close to
1
that.
in 10 adults. Yep.
Yeah, the chances are they're extremely high. You're going to have one, if not multiple people at an event of any size. And it could be, probably hundreds of people at Fancy had food allergies and they were all just walking around trying to do their best. And I happen to be, I don't know, I might not have been the only one who had a problem, but I'm the only one who I know of that made a LinkedIn post about it. So.
Well, and years ago, I posted something about teaching a class on food allergies and dietary restrictions and including celiac and an event planner who worked for an association that was of wheat manufacturing somehow. I don't know. She's like, well, you don't tell me what I can and can't serve at events. I'm like, I'm not telling, or she's like, or no, actually, sorry, that was wrong. She got mad that I was talking about celiac and that wheat was bad. I'm like, I'm not saying wheat is bad or peanuts are bad. I'm saying that you have people at your events that can't eat those foods. So providing an accommodation for them or an option for them to fully participate is what my goal is, right? It's not to say, hey, we have to like go put pesticides on all the peanuts and get rid of peanuts for the rest of our lives, right? We're never having peanuts. That's not my goal, right? And that's not your goal either, right? It's like, I mean, I guess maybe for you, because peanuts were eliminated completely, you would be fine. But at the same time, we know that's not a reality either.
Yeah.
Right?
And I don't want people to stop eating peanuts. I just want to stop feeling like I am in danger because peanuts are not labeled or poorly labeled or the staff doesn't know, right? Like someone could be next to me eating a peanut butter jelly sandwich. I'm not going to tell them to stop. Now, some people have to if they have that airborne component, but you know, peanuts can be a healthy food, right? And it's a lower cost food, great lunch item, like lunch option on a budget. I see the nutritious value the same way that, you know, I see the nutritious value of whole grains, but peanuts for a person with a peanut allergy are objectively bad for them, whereas they're probably good for the rest of society. And same thing with wheat. You know, for me, wheat is a great thing. Whole grains, whole wheat pasta, healthy things. But for someone with celiac, that will make them really sick.
Right.
So yeah, I like that idea of like, I'm not trying to take it away from everyone, but I am just trying to make it safer for people who really, really will suffer if they accidentally consume these things. And yeah, I wish more people understood that.
Yeah, we're not saying, hey, like just for me, right? Or just for the handful of people that are here. But and there was actually a story from last summer. I went to an event and a woman sat in my education session. I think I've told this story. I don't know if I've told it on the podcast or not, but she has an anaphylaxis to hazelnuts and she can't touch, even if like you're touching hazelnuts, she could not shake your hand. Right. And it did not get communicated down. And she there were some brownies, and thankfully this was on the last day. There were some brownies and they clearly had nuts in them. And she asked the server, are those walnuts or what kind of nuts are those? And they're like, oh no, those are just walnuts. And the chef, I don't know if it was the pastry chef or the executive chef, was behind that person and said, no, those are hazelnuts in there. And she's like, thank you so much for saving my life. But then she was, and I know this because she emailed me after the fact and told me what happened, but she was now worried about shaking people's hands because you don't eat brownies with a fork, right? You eat brownies, it's in a napkin and you're eating it with your fingers. So all those people are not going and washing their hands after they eat that brownie, right? And so it heightened her stress levels to be in that environment, and also made her mad because what happened with the message that she provided the organizers.
Yeah. And I do feel the same way. So they actually found out I was allergic to peanuts on a flight because my dad ate the peanuts. And then he said he touched my neck. And my brother and sister also had peanut, tree nut allergies. So they knew this was a possibility. They weren't going to feed me any peanuts. And back then the advice was to wait. So I had ideally had not really eaten peanuts before then, but I broke out into like a huge rash. And they said, I think this one has a peanut allergy too. But I have that sensitivity to touch. And I was very grateful. So one thing that I think was good that came out of COVID, some people are still like, let's do away with the handshake, right? I don't feel super comfortable touching people I don't know, right? And that's because I don't know what they've eaten. So I do like it when there's an option to say, hey, I'd prefer not to do a handshake, but like, can we do an elbow bump?
Right. Yeah.
Again, those things to many people may seem silly, but to me, I feel much more comfortable not touching you unless I know what you've eaten, or maybe like, I know you are a person who knows what I have going on and would wash their hands.
Right. Yeah.
But unfortunately, in professional settings, I do often have to shake hands. And luckily, I've never had a problem with it. But I am acutely aware that it could mean that my hands break out in hives. Would that be the end of the world? No, but I shouldn't have to go through that. I don't want to go through that. It would be uncomfortable. and it would ruin my day.
Well, and those hives could turn into something else in the long run, right? I mean, there's an event planner I met who shook a fishmonger's hand, and she's allergic to shellfish, and the hives went straight up her arm and had to leave the event. And so, yeah, you never know.
Yeah, I've never had one that was that severe, but again, I have broken out into hives from touching. And that was something that happened to me too at school. Like kids, there was a kid who was kind of a bully, and he was brushing the crumbs of his peanut crackers on my desk. And I said, stop doing that. I'm allergic to peanuts. And then I broke out, like my arms were breaking out into hives because one of the crumbs must have hit me. And, he thought, oh, I'm just having a good time teasing this girl. And I had to go to the nurse. I had to go home. It ruined my day. So yeah, the touch thing is tricky, but I am grateful. I know some people have it much worse, but I think I probably would just get hives. Yeah. Hopefully. But yeah, it's just something to think about.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Another thing to just try to accommodate. And I don't know, maybe putting out little, I don't know if a wet wipe would help.
Yeah. I don't think wet wipes work in that context.
Yeah. I feel like,
right.
Yeah. I feel like they kill germs, but not peanut protein.
and just on that note, did you see this story? I mean, because we're talking about peanuts, the movie A World Unaware. It earned an Oscar consideration, bringing food allergy awareness to the spotlight. It's the kid. I think it documents the story of the football player in Texas whose teammates put peanuts in his locker room or in his locker and in his food. And it's just mind-boggling. So, but got an Oscar nod. So I'll find the link and share it out to everybody. But
I haven't seen it, but I have heard that story, and that sounds so terrible. And it's like a little triggering for me to hear about that, just based on experiences I've had. And
he
definitely worth checking out.
Did see a story that he's transferred schools and he's thriving, right? I'm like, because the school system did nothing, but that's a whole nother conversation. All right. So I have a couple of rapid fire questions for you, if you're good. Okay. So what's one change that you would love to see that would make every meal feel safer for you? I think you've told us like 20, but which, if you narrowed it down?
I would love to see Addie type bills pass in all states. I know right now it's only focused on chain restaurants, but I think it would raise a lot more awareness, and it would put systems in place that make it easier for me to know if my allergen is in the food I'm eating at a chain restaurant. Yeah. So that would be great if we could see that nationally.
100% agree. And I'm going to clarify something, because actually the wording says food facility with more than 20 locations nationwide, and last week Dylan said he thinks it's worldwide too. So I'm going to venture to say, hey, company that sells food that's not necessarily a restaurant, but you have 20 locations, I'm going to include you in that because it says food facilities. So I'm going to take away
that would be great.
Yeah. I'm going to push for that. One word describes how you want people to feel when you're eating at an event?
How I want other people to feel about me?
How you want people to feel when eating at an event. Just how do you want people to feel?
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
I think included.
Okay. Yeah, because you don't want anybody to have to walk away from the table. Yeah.
And everybody should get a meal.
Agree. And it shouldn't be, a plate of lettuce. What is, with a nut allergy, there's a lot of snacks out there. And when you're traveling, do you have a go-to safe snack that you eat? And a lot of the snacks have nuts in them. So what is your go-to snack while you're traveling?
I try to bring my own snacks when I'm traveling as much as possible. I don't want to ever be in a situation where, I go to an airport and there's something with a questionable label and I eat it and I have my first may contains reaction while I'm on a plane. So I try as much as possible when I'm traveling to bring my own food, stuff that I know is going to work for me. Yeah, that's my go-to.
All right. Awesome. And then finally, finish this sentence. Every meal should.
be safe.
Okay. All right. Well, Christina, I so appreciate you sharing your story. It's hard to, it's hard to share your story and be vulnerable. And I'm glad that you did. And I'm glad that you're using it as a tool to advocate for safer event awareness, eating with different food allergies.
Yeah. And thank you so much for giving me this platform to once again share my story. And I would be so happy if this at all helped push for safer event spaces or laws that keep people safe when they're eating at restaurants, event spaces, in any setting, really.
Yeah, I agree. Now, I'm going to they can connect with you on LinkedIn, right?
That's probably best.
Okay. And Christina LiPuma, your name is right there on the screen. So just reach out to her on LinkedIn. And I did put in the chat the link to your LinkedIn post. So if you see that, you can go directly to her post to hear her story in written form. But I thank you so much again for putting it out there and joining us today.
Great. Thanks for having me, Tracy.
You're welcome. And everybody, thank you for tuning in. If you're watching on the replay, Christina and I are happy to answer questions for you and help you look at how you can make more events more inclusive and safe for us. Thanks. And until then, stay safe and eat well. Have a great day. Thanks for listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast, where every meal matters. I'm Tracy Stuckrath, your food and beverage inclusion expert. Call me and let's get started right now on creating safe and inclusive food and beverage experiences for your customers, your employees, and your communities. Share the podcast with your friends and colleagues at our Eating at a Meeting Facebook page and on all podcast platforms. To learn more about me and receive valuable information, go to tracystuckrath.com. And if you'd like more information on how to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line, then visit eatingatameeting.com.